Today marks 42 years since 52 hostages were released from Iran in 1981. This came after Iranian students seized the embassy in Tehran and detained 66 people. The Iranians released 13 people on November 19th and 20th of 1979 and one other on July 11th of 1980. But it took until January 20th, 1981 to release the rest. Here's our 11 p.m. newscast from that day, the same day President Ronald Reagan was sworn into office.
WNYT 13, you're looking good.
Tuesday, January 20th on 13 News. 52 Americans take their first steps of freedom in Algiers tonight, then fly on to Wiesbaden. Throughout the capital district and around the country, bells ring to acknowledge their freedom. And almost overshadowed by the release of the hostages, a new American president takes office.
This is 13 News with Bob Kirk and Nancy Cozine.
Good evening. Two emotions are sweeping the nation tonight. They are a feeling of hope and an appreciation of freedom.
The hope comes with the inauguration of Ronald Reagan as this country's 40th president. Freedom because after 444 days in captivity, 52 Americans have begun their journey home from Iran. It was rainy and windy, but there were nothing but smiles as the former hostages got off an Algerian plane in Algiers tonight. All 52 were safe and sound as they were greeted by Algerian and American officials. One of those men was Warren Christopher, the Deputy Secretary of State, who had worked so hard to secure their freedom.
I have the great honor and privilege to act on behalf of the United States in affirming that you are back home and safely in our hands. This event answers our prayers, and we are more than delighted to accept the responsibility of seeing to it that you return to your homes and your families.
After roughly an hour on the ground, it was time to return to the air, but with a big difference. The former hostages were getting on American airplanes headed to an American airbase in West Germany, where they're due to land in about 30 minutes. This final day of the ordeal, day 444, has been long, exhausting, but ultimately satisfying. Larry Barr sums it up.
The 444th day of captivity for the 52 Americans began with hope and with some prayer.
That God will give strength and courage to the parents, families, and friends of those hostages. We pray to the Lord.
There were services just like this one all over the country, and the people here, as well as the people in all the other houses of worship, were hoping that this would be the last day they'd have to pray for the safety of the hostages. Jimmy Carter was one of the people hoping and praying the hardest. More than anything, he wanted to know that the hostages were free before he left office. Just before Ronald Reagan was sworn in, the president could only say, "We're still waiting." And although there were reports as early as half an hour before the inauguration that the hostages were free, the plane didn't actually take off until half an hour after President Reagan was sworn in.
The planes were at the end of the runway, and that was the final word until just following the ceremonies, in which we were told that the first plane was airborne at 12:33, and then 10 minutes later we heard the second.
That was the first official confirmation, but there was no celebration until almost 2 hours after the new president was sworn in. Exactly what happened at the Tehran airport isn't clear yet, but it appears that the Iranians were milking the last moments of the hostage crisis for all it was worth. A last stab at Jimmy Carter. The Iranians waiting an hour after they got word that their frozen assets had been transferred before letting the hostages' planes go. Walter Cronkite summed up how many of us felt about that.
So we can, I guess, come to that conclusion, that the Iranians, in the last defiance of civilized behavior, waited until the inauguration of President Reagan before letting the hostages go, keeping them waiting an unnecessary 24 hours beyond the unnecessary 444 days.
But returning home to Plains, Georgia, the ex-president would not condemn, only give thanks.
It's impossible for me to realize, for any of us, how they feel on that plane, because they recognize that they are hostages no more, they are prisoners no more, and they are coming back to this land that we all love.
And all across this nation, those feelings are shared. The long wait is over. The candles can go out. The ribbons can come down. Larry Barr, 13 News.
There is still another American left behind in a Tehran jail tonight. In a case not related to the hostages, Cynthia Dwyer, a freelance writer from Buffalo, was arrested in Tehran last May. State Department officials say they still don't know why, but they say they will try to find a way to get her free too. On the release of the 52 American hostages, former President Carter told a crowd in Plains, Georgia, that the release agreement preserved the dignity of the nation. But New York City Mayor Ed Koch couldn't agree less. Koch said the deal struck by the Carter administration amounts to paying ransom. And he said the whole incident makes the U.S. look like a paper tiger. But for most people, the end of the hostage crisis seemed to bring only joy and relief that it was finally over. Here in Albany, throughout the morning, people were listening for the latest words on the hostages. That was the way it was in City Hall for Joe Emma. Glued to the radio, he waited for a certain phrase.
Radio has not indicated at all.
Joe Emma is the man who operates the carillons at Albany City Hall. He's been hanging around the carillon keyboard here at the back of the building department, waiting for the news of the hostages' release and waiting to launch into a selection of songs to celebrate that release. At 11:30 a.m., it seemed like the breakthrough he'd been waiting for.
The latest word of flash from United Press International, 2 words, hostages freed, but again, no official confirmation. It appears though they are on their way home. Now, let's go back to inaugural ceremonies.
I'm waiting for a more official word. They didn't say Tehran, did they?
No, just UPI is reporting hostages free.
Well, we better wait for
which is the time that Mr. Reagan is to take.
Just a few minutes later, the waiting was over, and Joe tolled the C note, a symbolic 52 times. Then the familiar melody, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree, reverberated around City Hall and downtown Albany. For Joe Emma and the nation, the waiting had ended. Chris Bruner, 13 News at Albany City Hall.
I'm Ellen Miller at the Shenendehowa School campus. The carillon bells rang out here this afternoon, and there was a moment of silence. A year's worth of tension flowed out of 12-year-old Corey Chartres. Corey has been wearing a braided yellow macrame cord around her wrist since last January. For 52 people she has never met.
Well, being in America, and they were Americans, it just was kind of like part of me, so.
Did you think about this all the time over the last year?
Yeah.
This afternoon, when the hostages were safely in the air, Corey's mother helped her cut the symbolic yellow cord.
Stop.
Ellen Miller, 13 News, Clifton Park.
Says a lot more than words could ever say. Ahead on 13 News, Ronald Reagan takes control of the Oval Office.
And some people in Albany tonight celebrate the inauguration. In Washington, the night is aglow with firework displays, Hollywood entertainment, and inaugural balls. But here in Albany, the party seemed to fizzle. It was an official satellite inaugural ball with proceeds going to the Albany Opportunity Commission. The event was billed as bipartisan, but its organizer, Maureen Dumas, said she doesn't think many took it that way.
It could be because the president's message didn't filter down at the local level. He wanted this to be a bipartisan event. He wanted it to benefit a local charity. We tried to do that, and it didn't pan out.
Looking on the bright side, Dumas says that at least people have found out that the commission exists. Things were much brighter at the inauguration ceremonies today. Larry Barr has that story.
So help me God. Now, I congratulate you, sir.
Ronald Wilson Reagan took his oath as the nation's 40th president without knowing whether or not the hostages were free. But in his inaugural address, the new president remembered the 52 Americans, the tortures they've been through, and the tortures this nation has been through, even though he didn't mention the hostages directly.
We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors.
The rest of the president's 15-minute speech was filled with the same kind of Reagan optimism and confidence. The president talked of a new concern for we the people, and he renewed his campaign pledge to reduce the role government plays in all of our lives.
So there will be no misunderstanding. It's not my intention to do away with government. It is rather to make it work. Work with us, not over us. To stand by our side, not ride on our back. Government can and must provide opportunity, not smother it. Foster productivity, not stifle it.
Mr. Reagan also tried to allay fears that he will bow to special interests at the cost of poor and middle-income people. And as presidents in the past have done, the 69-year-old chief executive asked for national unity.
So with all the creative energy at our command, let us begin an era of national renewal. Let us renew our determination, our courage, and our strength. And let us renew our faith and our hope. We have every right to dream heroic dreams.
Mr. Reagan told this crowd at the Capitol that we must act today to preserve tomorrow. And shortly after this ceremony ended, the president signed his first executive order, which freezes federal hiring. Larry Barr, 13 News.
And President Reagan already has plans beyond that hiring freeze on the agenda, getting rid of the Council on Wage and Price Stability, suspending all pending federal regulations and directives to his cabinet officers to uncover waste and fraud.
John Wolf says tonight will be clear and cold, tomorrow sunny.
The forecast plus tonight's vote on games of chance in Gilderland, that's coming up on 13 News.
At first, it was thought to be a serious accident, but instead there was good news for Kevin Rabindo. The 3-year-old ran into the street from between two parked cars and was hit by an oncoming car. Troy emergency crews came to the scene at River and Broadway, rushed Kevin to a Samaritan hospital where he was later treated and released. Police say the driver was not at fault in the accident.
More than 200 teachers jammed into the Troy High School library tonight to demand a contract settlement. Troy teachers have been working without a contract since last July. Members of Troy's school board heard their request and negotiations are still continuing. But Troy's teachers felt a show of support was needed.
We are still working just as hard in the classroom. The increase in pay has not come, and we just need to make more money. And compared to the other school districts, we are very, very low.
Some teachers from neighboring school districts carrying picket signs to the meeting were barred.
A 3-alarm fire wrecked 2 buildings, left 4 families homeless in the city of Rensselaer this morning. Chris Bruner reports that unionized firemen are saying it could have been worse because of city staffing policies.
Flames broke out at number 40 2nd Avenue in the city of Rensselaer at around 5:30 this morning, and then spread to number 42 2nd Avenue. Both buildings were heavily damaged, and authorities say someone had sprinkled gasoline around the first floor of number 40 on Sunday night. So the origin of this morning's fire is suspicious. The fire has also renewed some discontent among unionized full-time firemen in Rensselaer over city staffing policies. Under normal circumstances, the city of Rensselaer keeps a minimum of 4 of its 5 fire companies open. But because of vacations, like for instance Sunday and Thursday, Engine 2 here would be closed. Now the union people are saying that if the fire on 2nd Avenue had occurred on either Sunday or Thursday, when Engine 2 was closed, the results could have been much worse.
To say absolutely what would happen would be almost impossible, but the way we feel about it is we needed the extra firepower. We feel that we may have lost a 3rd house if we didn't have that extra engine. Yeah. You're talking about property, another 2 families, I believe it was a 2-family house on both sides, that we could have lost 1 or 2 extra houses.
Mayor Joseph Mink was unavailable for an interview on camera, but told 13 News by phone that the city's staffing policies do not endanger any lives. The Cutbacks in the fire department's full-time staff are justified by the city's decreasing population, and the city's insurance underwriters have approved the policy. Chris Bruner, 13 News.
It will soon be legal in the town of Guilderland for charitable groups to run games of chance. Residents of the town okayed that proposal in a special referendum. The vote total 411 for, 237 against. The vote must now be filed with the Secretary of State and the Racing and Wagering Board. The law will make it legal for charities to run games for money using dice and wheels of fortune.
And if you were gambling on it being warm tonight, guess who lost? John?
Here I am, the friend of the people. Well, I'm revising my forecast. Radiational cooling and no winds. Temperature's going down tonight. You won't feel it, though, because no winds. 7 below. What's that?
How cold is it?
How cold is it? 7 below. How's that between friends? Not bad at all. The average daily high for this date, January 20th, is 30. The low 12. Our high today was 34. That 7 is our present temperature. Clear skies. That 7 translate to minus 13 Celsius. The winds are from the northwest, gently at 4. Relative humidity is 57%, and the barometer, that's steady at 30.21. The reason for it all is high pressure south of James Bay. No winds, very still, very quiet. The cold spot in the past 24 hours, by the way, 12 below, and that goes to Messina. That's their present temperature. The hot spot, well, that's out in California. We'll show that in a minute. Low pressure moving through Alabama will continue to move northeast by late Thursday afternoon. It'll probably peak off Maryland, and we'll get some cloud cover out of it, some moisture, some light snow. Nothing serious. It'll continue its pattern northeast and out, not up. So we'll be all right till then. Until then, clear skies, just beautiful. Notice the way it warmed up so nicely today around the nation, except Tampa, St. Pete, 68, a little below normal for them. But D.C. for the inauguration, 56 and sunny. It was lovely. And above normal still out west, 41 in Kansas City and 60 in Cut Bank, Montana. That's a record high for them today. And Spokane, 62, remains mild and snowless out in the Rockies. The hot spot, yeah, Palm Springs, it was 79. Clear and cold in Buffalo, 18. Now we get into the single digits. Rochester, 9. Syracuse, 8 degrees. 4 below in Watertown. There's that Messina, 12 below. Utica, close to us, it's 8 above. Nice and toasty warm in Gloversville with 4 above because it's 3 below in Glens Falls and 1 below in Bennington. The Capital District, a pair of 7s for Albany and Troy. Schenectady, you're still 9 above, but going down. Clear and cold tonight, the low 0 to 7 below. Sunny tomorrow, a beautiful day, the high in the low 30s. Fair tomorrow night, not as cold, the low about 15 above. Increasing cloudiness Thursday with a chance of light snow developing late in the day, the high around 37. For southwestern Vermont and the Berkshires, clear and cold tonight, the low near 12 below. Sunny tomorrow, the high around 30. Chance of snow, none through tomorrow night. The winds light through tomorrow night. The sun will rise 7:19 a.m. and set at 4:54 p.m. So those chilling temperatures, somewhat of a surprise, but you won't feel it because, again, calm winds, and we'll wake up to a beautiful sunny morning tomorrow. Okay?
Count on it, right?
You can.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Next on 13 News, Bill Lambden has action from tonight's RPI hockey game against Colgate.
Plus tonight's critical Big Ten contest between Catholic Central and Albany.
With John Graney on vacation, let's get news of the Big Ten from Big Bill. Big Bill Lambden. Bill.
And you know, we went to Hawaii. Do you believe it? 7 below here. 2 teams tied for second in the Big Ten, colliding tonight. Catholic Central of Troy led all the way against Albany. They built a 5-point halftime advantage to a 9-point 71-62 victory. Number 20 in the white, John Leonard, had a big game with 35 points. He was joined by Junior McCormick with 15. Terry Jones was high for Albany with 13. So Catholic Central remains a game behind Linton, which was 14 points better than Bishop McGinn. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, CBA bombed Amsterdam. John Berkeley had 23 as Troy did a number on LaSalle, and Mount Pleasant dispatched Bishop Gibbons. The top game tonight in the Patroon Conference matched Hudson and Rensselaer with the league lead in the balance. Hudson, the winner, on the road by 7. Elsewhere, Catskill won big at home against Chatham. Averill Park edged Keaveney. In overtime, Ichabod Crane beats Maple Hill. Taconic Hills belted Coxsackie. No scores in the Adirondack. We need your calls. Over in the northern, Saratoga Catholic by 16 against Fort Edward. St. Mary's of Hoosick Falls remains perfect in the conference, beating Whitehall by 22. Still waiting for Sharon Springs. In the Suburban Conference, Shenendehowa too much for Columbia. Burn Hills edged Mohonasen. Colony by the narrowest of margins over Guilderland. Shaker still unbeaten in the Suburban Council. Tim Kaine had 35 tonight as Shaker belted Niskayuna. Bethlehem beats Scotia. In non-league games, we're waiting for these. Cambridge won big over Granville, 81-62, and Stillwater beat Mechanicville. A makeup game in the Tri-Valley League, Northville beating St. Johnsville, not on the board. Argyle beat Lake George, 63-58. Hey, it is on the board. They're not in the Tri-Valley League, though. You have to play them one at a time. It's one of the oldest cliches, but it's also one of the most appropriate tonight. The heavily favored Siena Indians lost on the road tonight to Vermont, 86-79. Dan Twilliger best in the losing cause with 20. Siena now 10-5. And John Leonard had 16 as Manhattan lost to Yale, 78-64. Check this one. Skidmore humbling Green Mountain. That's no mistake, 107-30. And the College of St. Rose beat Albany Business while Fulton Montgomery belted HVCC 66-47. In women's college basketball, Siena over Manhattanville, and in girls high school, Tamarack won against Schuylerville. NBA East All-Star reserves out tonight from the Celtics: Parrish, Bird, and Archibald. New York's Michael Ray Richardson, also Marcus Johnson and Bobby Jones. In the league tonight, Ray Williams had 30 as the Knicks edged the Sonics. Cleveland over Portland. The Bullets won their 6th straight. Detroit surprised Philadelphia. Kansas City handled Dallas. In overtime, the Spurs sank the Suns, and the Bulls upended the Pacers. That score was Indiana losing to Chicago 121-105. The Engineers of RPI now on the road for 5 games. 3,400 looking on at the Fieldhouse tonight as RPI hosted Colgate, but tonight they had their hands more than full. RPI's Jay Wall scored the goal you just saw, then Bob DeBreeze put one in the net, but Colgate came from 3-1 to tie it at 3-all going into the 3rd period. But then trouble. Colgate in red scored the last 5 goals of the game. The final score, Colgate 6, RPI 3, both teams now 11-6. Elsewhere, Union beat Plattsburgh. Just one game final in the National Hockey League where the Islanders blanked the Calgary Flames 5-0. Mike Bossy did not score in that one. Bum Phillips, it's almost certain, hasn't been announced yet. He will be in at New Orleans, though.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much. And we'll be back with more news in just a moment. President Reagan took his oath of office in a cutaway coat and striped pants. In so doing, he resumed a tradition dating back to the early days of the Republic. And he tried to encourage members of Congress to follow his lead. But many thought better of the idea, some saying it cost too much. Well, Congressman Morris Udall, a Democrat, said he had a perfectly good blue serge suit. But at 6'5", he had his own special reason for objecting to renting formal wear. As he put it, the last time I had to wear something like this, they had to cut holes in the sleeves. And that's 13 News for now. I'm Bob Kirk.
I'm Nancy Cozine. Stay tuned to TV 13 for more live coverage of the Freed Americans on CBS. For all of us, good night.
I'm Mike Moran. For all the news overnight, join Benita Zahn and me on midday tomorrow at noon.
An important moment in history for sure, and we have so many other important moments in history archived in our News Vault. To see those other videos, head to our YouTube page, click on News Vault. Opening News Vault 13, I'm Rachel Tiede.